The turnover for the group was up 3.4%, which is a figure we were quite pleased with in the prevailing economic circumstances. Unfortunately, the economic pressures did result in a slight decline in the gross margins in percentage terms, but they were quite significantly higher in rand terms. So our gross margins did increase in rands. Operating expenses were very well contained throughout the group. The increase was just over 2%, which included the impact of the prior year directors' fees, which were accounted for in the current year. If we exclude the previous year's directors' fees, the costs for the current year, the increase was just over 1%. The net result was that the operating profit was virtually unchanged from the prior year. Finance costs were slightly higher due to our borrowings increasing slightly, particularly in the first half of the year. The second half, the borrowings were in fact slightly less than the prior years. The net result was that the total profit for the year after tax was just over 8% down for the year. We had slightly higher number of shares in issue following the acquisitions of Suntaps and Degrichem the previous year. This resulted in the earnings per share decreasing by 11%. But in order to understand the figures better, we've calculated the earnings per share if the directors' fees relating to the prior years had been accounted for in those previous years. In fact, the normalised earnings for the current year would have increased by almost 27%. On the balance sheet side, there was no significant capital expenditure. So on the non-current assets, there was very little change. The working capital was very well controlled across the group and was well within the budgeted parameters. The net result was that the cash, the borrowings of the group increased very slightly for the year as a whole, but was quite somewhat less than what we had anticipated at the start of the year. And we trust that this gives us some capacity in terms of the gearing capability, which is only at 40% and is constantly reducing, gives us some capacity going forward to do some additional transactions.